Hey guys, tonight we are going deep into the steaming jungles of Cambodia, where you brush away a wall of giant leaves and catch your first glimpse of something impossible. Carvings in sandstone that should have crumbled centuries ago. Colossal towers jutting from tangled vines like stone thorns in the earth. The shadows of lost royalty dancing in the torchlight of your imagination. This is Angkor, once the seat of the Khmer Empire, a place so enormous, so mind-bendingly engineered, that its rediscovery shattered everything people thought they knew about medieval Asia. You probably won't survive this jungle expedition if you slip on one of the mossy stones. Just a heads up, try not to go full Indiana Jones. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to comment with where you're watching from and what time you're tuning in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push forward through the green hush, insects humming like static in your ears, to stand before the famed gates of Angkor Thom. Giant stone faces, smiling that unsettling half-smile of knowing secrets you don't. You can almost hear the echoes of elephant caravans, the clatter of ox carts, the busy chatter of 12th century market vendors calling out their wares. This city was the Khmer capital, commanding a population that might have rivaled London's, or even surpassed it in its day. Historians estimate as many as 1 million souls lived here, which is wild when you think about medieval Europe's cramped and plague-ridden towns. There's a faintly comical smell of elephant dung, fish sauce, and human sweat you'd catch if you time traveled back, blending together in the tropical heat. No TikTok deodorant hacks to save you there. That grand avenue you step onto, once crowded with dignitaries and farmers alike, feels haunted now, ghost still, under the colossal stone towers. It's so massive that many believed the early French explorers were exaggerating the ruins. Surely no primitive culture could have managed a metropolis on this scale, right? The arrogance is almost painful in hindsight. You pass under that monumental gate, beneath the gaze of bodhisattvas, carved in precise, unblinking detail. It's no Disney castle, but it might as well be a medieval megacity's power statement. Angkor had embassies, engineers, priests, acrobats, and warriors, all moving like clockwork. Historians still argue whether the Khmer built Angkor purely as a demonstration of power, or as a true spiritual pivot point, a living axis mundi, linking heaven and earth. Behind those walls, you'd find a marvel of social order. Rice farmers outside the moat, their taxes supporting the king's lavish court. Artisans chiseling divine images that shimmered in candlelight. even scientists measuring water flow. Yes, Khmer engineers were legit scientists, keeping the city from drowning or dying of thirst, depending on fickle monsoons. Mainstream history confirms Angkor, at its height, controlled trade routes from China to India, like a high stakes medieval Amazon Prime hub. But you also catch wind of something a bit more fringe. The rumor that priests at Angkor experimented with psychedelic mushrooms to gain divine visions of how to place temple towers in the perfect cosmological pattern. Hey, you'd want a little fungal boost too if you had to plan out the biggest urban grid on the planet, right? Past the moat, the city's heart beats around Angkor Wat itself, a monument so large you'd swear aliens had a hand in it. Though sorry, History Channel. No evidence for laser-eyed extraterrestrials here. What you do see is a testament to human devotion, raised block by block through centuries of sweat and genius. The stonework is hypnotic. Bas reliefs coil around the walls like living murals, telling you stories of gods doing battle, heavenly maidens dancing, armies marching to war. There's a carved cosmic sea of milk swirling with monsters. Good luck sleeping tonight with that in your head. And you note that despite what Westerners once assumed, these artists weren't crude or naive. They were experts, almost obsessed with symmetry and religious allegory. Angkor Wat's layout is precisely aligned to the cardinal directions, a gigantic mandala set in stone. Modern archaeologists use satellites to realize just how geometric and intentional the city was. Its avenues laid out in ways that mirrored sacred Hindu cosmology. That means when you're lost here tonight, you're basically wandering through a cosmic diagram of the universe. No pressure. And as you wander, you see offerings left by modern pilgrims. Incense sticks, wilted lotus petals, a cracked clay pot holding a half-melted candle. Even after centuries of abandonment, people keep returning to these ruins, as if drawn by some unseen magnetic pull. It gives you chills, the kind you feel when someone watches you from a dark corner. Only here, it's 1,000 stone ancestors staring you down. Historians still argue whether the final abandonment of Angkor was really so total. Some believe small communities never fully left, clinging to sacred shrines long after the empire's fall. In a way, the place never truly died, just slept, waiting to be remembered. If you look closer, you might even find scrawled messages on temple walls, graffiti left by monks in the 1500s or 1600s, proof that someone, somehow, kept tending these stones. And in that sense, you realize Angkor isn't just a ruin. It's a living organism, half stone, half dream, half terrifying night hike, where one wrong step might land you face first in a moat full of swampy black water. Still, You push on, heart drumming, senses on overload, and pause by a weather-worn statue whose lips curl into that eerie Khmer smile. You feel, for a moment, that you've arrived in a city no one could find because no one even imagined looking for it here, beneath centuries of vines and doubt. And with that first glimpse of Angkor's mysteries, your journey is only beginning. Word count 1080. Awaiting continue. Pham Danoi continue. ChatGPT Danoi. Section 2. You leave the Grand Causeway behind and wander deeper into the city's skeletal remains, where the jungle swells like a tide of green silence. Here, stone walls lean under the weight of banyan roots thick as anacondas. They creep down temple sides like slow, leafy fingers, reclaiming what was never theirs. You step carefully because those roots aren't just pretty. They crack foundations, twist doorways, and sometimes hide sudden pits in the floor. Think of it as a very aggressive, nature-themed escape room. This wasn't always a place of whispers and ruin. Once, it was the capital of an empire so ambitious it tried to engineer the weather. You squint upward and imagine this same skyline 1,000 years ago. No vines, no moss, just rising spires, dusted gold. A city of gods glowing in the dawn mist. And then, gradually, it disappears. Not in a day, not in a week. It's like watching a stage curtain fall in slow motion, grain by grain, vine by vine. The decline of Angkor is one of the great historical vanishing acts. For centuries, it became almost a myth. The Portuguese showed up in the 1500s and basically said, "Wait, who built this jungle Versailles?" The jungle had already devoured whole neighborhoods by then. Birds nested in rooftop towers. Monkeys ruled the courtyards. A city once bursting with markets and processions fell silent, buried under the slow avalanche of plant life. You feel the humidity press into your skin like wet silk. It's the same tropical climate that once allowed Khmer agriculture to flourish, until it turned on them. Historians still argue whether Angkor was abandoned quickly due to sudden catastrophe, or slowly drained by decades of environmental collapse. Either way, what's clear is that the very jungle that gave Angkor life eventually smothered it. It's oddly poetic. The Khmer tamed their surroundings with grand canals and massive reservoirs, some big enough to be mistaken for natural lakes from the air. The West Baray, for instance, spans over 16 square kilometers. You could dump the entire city of Paris in there and still have room for your floaties. These hydraulic feats were what made Angkor thrive. Water management let them farm 3 or 4 rice crops a year, unheard of in medieval Europe. But water has a wicked sense of humor. As monsoons grew unpredictable, the intricate canals silted up. Droughts bake the reservoirs dry. Then rains would hit like hammer blows, overwhelming the clogged system and flooding neighborhoods. One bad year, they recovered. 10 bad years in a row? Suddenly, a jungle starts looking like a rival, not a backdrop. You tiptoe through a fallen corridor where moss has thickened into carpet. Lichen blooms on bas reliefs like cosmic freckles. All around you, faces stare from the walls, frozen in mid-chant or dance, their lips curling in that timeless Khmer smirk. Were they smiling at the gods? Or at the tourists they knew would come centuries later, baking in cargo shorts and whispering, "Wow," into GoPros? And here's the fringe fact of the night. Some believe that the jungle itself was semi-sacred, that Angkor was designed with zones meant to be consumed by nature over time as a form of cosmic recycling. It's out there, sure, but look around. Doesn't it feel intentional somehow? The way certain towers are completely overtaken while others remain strangely untouched. You squeeze through a stone doorway, barely wide enough for your shoulders. On the far side, a collapsed library. Not books, of course. This was all palm leaf manuscripts and oral tradition. But this was once a center of learning. Priests studied cosmology, statecraft, herbal medicine, and even astronomy. One Khmer manuscript describes how to tell time using shadows cast by a single incense stick. Honestly, you wish your smartwatch had that mode. Back outside, you stumble over half-buried steps and imagine how this must have played out. One day, a family abandons their home because the flood won't recede. The next, a whole district relocates to higher ground. Eventually, priests stop chanting. Temples stop glowing with candlelight. Frogs move in, and slowly, Angkor becomes invisible. Historians still debate the precise tipping point. Was it a final, massive flood? A series of crop failures? Or maybe it wasn't environmental at all? Perhaps shifting political power drew the royal court elsewhere, and without the king's presence, the city simply lost its reason to exist. You can almost hear the argument, why stay here in the swamps when we can build new palaces inland? Bureaucrats gonna bureaucrat. You rest beneath a frangipani tree, its blossoms littering the stones like confetti. In the distance, a hornbill calls, low and mournful. You realize the forest didn't just take over, it preserved. It mummified the city in green. The stones didn't vanish, they waited. That's what's so eerie about Angkor. Unlike Atlantis or El Dorado, it wasn't destroyed in one spectacular cataclysm. It didn't sink or burn. It just faded, slowly, reluctantly, as if trying not to bother anyone on the way out. You think of modern cities, steel skyscrapers, concrete jungles, and wonder if they fell silent, how long would they last before the vines return? As you continue walking, your foot catches on a vine, and you pitch forward, face to stone. 1,000-year-old step, worn by royal feet, now dings your chin like it's part of the lesson. Careful, it seems to whisper. The jungle's patient, but she doesn't like being ignored. And now that you've seen how nature swallowed a city, you're ready to meet the people who dared to build it in the first place. Word count 1080. Awaiting continue. Panda nói. Continue. ChatGPT đã nói. Section 3. You sit for a moment on the edge of a broken terrace, catching your breath. The humidity clings to your skin like a second shirt, and the scent of crushed leaves and ancient dust rises in slow, syrupy waves. Somewhere in the trees, a cicada starts its siren-like buzz, then another and another, until the whole jungle seems to sing around you like a prehistoric engine revving up. You close your eyes and listen, and for a second, you hear something else under the insects. Chanting, bells, drum beats. You open your eyes, and time shifts. You are still in Angkor. But now the jungle is gone, cleared. Pavilions rise around you. Elephant tusks glisten with ceremonial polish. Sacred fires flicker at temple gates. The sandstone gleams, and at the center of it all stands a man who believes he is more than mortal. The Khmer Empire was ruled by kings who weren't just monarchs. They were gods, or at least they said they were. The system was called Devaraja, meaning God King, and it wasn't just good PR. It was a full spiritual political doctrine that declared the ruler a living embodiment of Shiva or Vishnu, depending on the mood and decade. That's like your president claiming to be Thor and expecting everyone to just roll with it. But the people did, and not because they were gullible. The Khmer rulers backed up their divinity with roads, rice, and relentless ritual. They made the monsoon rain feel like a divine blessing. They built water systems so elaborate that farmers called them God channels. And they hired priests and artists to sculpt cosmic power into every block of their capital. You walk through the royal courts of Suryavarman Suku, the builder of Angkor Wat. He was not subtle. His temple wasn't just a religious monument. It was also his tomb, his palace, and his celestial timeshare all in one. The entire thing was laid out as a giant mandala, symbolizing Mount Meru, the sacred mountain at the center of the universe in Hindu cosmology. Basically, he put himself at the center of everything. Respect. Historians still argue whether these rulers believed their own divinity or were just spectacular showmen with excellent branding. But walk these corridors long enough, and you'll start to feel the conviction etched into every wall. Gods with multiple arms battle demons in slow motion reliefs. Celestial nymphs, apsaras, float in eternal mid-dance. No detail was too small to carry divine meaning. Even the number of steps in a stairway mattered, matching cosmological calculations only monks and math nerds could decode. Of course, not every king managed to balance ego and empire. Jayavarman VII, for example, came after a brutal invasion by the Cham people and basically went full vengeful avatar mode. He built more structures in 2 decades than most civilizations manage in 2 centuries. Roads, hospitals, temples. He turned Angkor Thom into a spiritual fortress with Bayon Temple at its heart, a tower with those famously smirking faces watching every direction. You glance up at one now. It watches you like it knows what time you woke up this morning and how many times you hit snooze. That's right. They see everything. Jayavarman VII also did something revolutionary. He made Mahayana Buddhism the state religion, which meant compassion became a political tool. Hospitals were built not just for royal PR, but as a way to show divine mercy. Carvings from this era depict doctors, patients, even little surgical scenes with tools laid out beside sick nobles. It's enough to make you wonder if your insurance plan would cover a 12th century Khmer leeching. But even this king couldn't escape reality forever. As the royal cult of personality expedited, so did the pressure. Projects ballooned, temples became grander, and the resources needed to maintain it all, staggering. You can almost hear the whispers from the outer provinces. Taxes, conscription, never-ending construction. Here's a weird little nugget for you. There's a fringe theory that the king's architects, in secret rebellion, hid playful critiques in the artwork, like a builder carving a monkey, giving side-eye behind the back of a divine figure. Subtle, sneaky, possibly real. No one's confirmed it, but next time you see a sandstone monkey smirking too hard, give it a wink. Back in the heat of the main avenue, you pass a statue pedestal with no head. Most of Angkor's statues have been decapitated, some during later invasions, some during colonial looting, others, strangely, by the Khmer themselves, when religion shifted again and temples were cleansed of outdated gods. It's like wiping a hard drive with a hammer. And just like that, the divine kings lost their footing. Belief systems changed. Power centers moved. But the architecture stayed, mute and magnificent. These weren't just buildings. They were expressions of belief so solid they outlived the very gods they worshipped. You duck under another lintel and feel the pulse of history slow, like the temple itself is tired. The kings who once rode elephants through these halls are gone, but their shadows linger in the carvings, and their ambitions still echo in the silence. You realize something unsettling. Angkor wasn't just a city, it was a statement, a cosmic declaration made in stone and sweat that said, "We're not just part of the universe, we are the universe." And when you build with that kind of thinking, you don't expect your city to ever be lost. But pride, as every bedtime historian knows, comes before the fall. Word count 1082. Awaiting continue. Phật đã nói continue. ChatGPT đã nói. Section 4. You brush aside a curtain of low-hanging vines and step into what remains of a once bustling complex. Stone towers reaching toward the sky like fingers frozen in mid-prayer. The air smells of rain-damp earth and old stone, and the cicadas have gone quiet for a moment, as if even they are reverent here. This was a city built not just by divine will or royal command, but by an entire population working together with staggering coordination, organization, and sheer grit. Let's talk materials. You reach out and run your fingers along the cool, coarse surface of a sandstone block. Now imagine hauling this single block, often weighing more than an average SUV, dozens of miles from the quarries at Mount Kulin. There were no trucks, no cranes, just elephants, rafts, carts, and thousands of hands. And this isn't one block, it's one of millions. Mainstream historians agree that the Khmer Empire moved an estimated 5 to 10 million tons of sandstone to construct Angkor. That's nearly enough to build a modern skyscraper city. And yet, here they crafted temples, libraries, bridges, causeways, and ceremonial pools, all assembled without mortar. Each block locked in like a 3D jigsaw puzzle. It's so precise, it's almost smug. But it wasn't just stone. You kneel by the edge of a dried-up canal and scoop a handful of red-brown earth. Beneath your fingers lies the secret engine of Angkor, its water system. The city didn't rely on rainfall. It controlled water. What you're looking at is one segment of a mind-blowingly vast hydrological network. It included hundreds of kilometers of canals, barrages, man-made reservoirs, moats, and spillways. These weren't afterthoughts. They were built first. Water management was the literal foundation of the empire. You know how cities today panic when it rains for an hour? The Khmer built a system that could handle biblical monsoons, catching rain, storing it, filtering it, then releasing it in dry months to irrigate their lush rice paddies. With this, they could harvest multiple rice crops a year, while Europe was lucky to pull off one. No offense to medieval peasants, but rice 3 times a year beats turnips any day. Historians still argue whether this water system was driven solely by practicality or whether it was also a massive spiritual metaphor. After all, Bares mirrored the oceans of Hindu cosmology. Water wasn't just water, it was sacred substance. These reservoirs weren't lakes, they were worlds. You cross over an ancient stone bridge, its balustrade shaped like multi-headed nagas, mythical serpent beings. Their stone tongues have been worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. On either side, headless guardians squat like sleeping giants, their arms locked around invisible swords. You'd think they're just decoration, but they also held symbolic power. These weren't just bridges, they were transitions between spiritual realms. Here's a fringe nugget. One explorer once suggested that Angkor's design encoded astronomical events, that the spacing between temples lined up with solstices and lunar cycles. It's not entirely proven, but the alignments are suspiciously elegant. Makes you wonder whether the whole city was a calendar you could walk through. That's next level Google Calendar. Back in the canal basin, you spot the remains of a trapying, a rectangular basin used for both storage and ritual bathing. Some scholars believe these doubled as purification stations for priests and pilgrims, a kind of spiritual car wash. Others argue they were simply open air reservoirs for daily life. Either way, they're everywhere, dotting Angkor like little mirrors to the sky. The more you look, the more you realize how organized it all was. Angkor wasn't just sprawling, it was planned. Grids of streets, zoning for temples, markets, and homes, even elevation changes to control runoff. It was urban engineering worthy of a modern city, and all of it built by manpower and mathematics. And yet, there's a human cost beneath all this symmetry. You pass a collapsed workers' dormitory and imagine the lives spent carving stone under the scorching sun. This wasn't a city built in a decade. It was a generational effort. Parents hauled blocks. Their children carved walls. Their grandchildren lit incense for ceremonies inside those same temples. Slavery? Not quite. But let's be real. If your king thought he was a god, you probably didn't get a ton of vacation days. Historians still debate the extent to which Khmer construction relied on forced labor versus communal devotion. Some records suggest temples were community efforts, offered as merit-making acts. Others hint at long-term labor conscription that wasn't exactly optional. You stop beside a sandstone block, half carved and abandoned. A chisel mark cuts deep into its side, the last breath of a carver who never returned. Did they fall ill? Did war arrive? Or was the stone simply flawed? The mystery is all that's left. But the mark remains, a millennia-old fingerprint in stone. And as you step away, the architecture around you begins to whisper louder. Every tower, every stairwell, every carving is part of a cosmic formula. Temples are tiered to represent Mount Meru's 5 peaks. Steep staircases aren't just dramatic, they symbolize the difficult climb toward enlightenment. Even doorways are narrow to force you to bow when entering sacred spaces. Subtle, right? Spiritual guilt trip via architecture. You reach the base of a pyramid temple and look up. The summit pierces the sky like a stone needle. It's dizzying. Climbing it would take time and bravery, given the angle. But from the top, you'd see what the Khmer kings saw. A kingdom so vast it could feed itself, defend itself, and write its own place into the universe. And all of it balanced delicately on the cycles of nature and the strength of human hands. For now, you begin your climb, carefully, slowly. Every step echoes with the voices of those who built this place, not to be found, but to be remembered. Word count 1086. Awaiting, continue. Bạn đã nói, continue. ChatGPT đã nói. Section mime. The sun begins to dip low on the horizon as you reach the top, your legs aching with every step, each stair carved with painstaking detail, each stone holding echoes of the many hands that pressed upon it. From here, the view of Angkor is staggering. You can see the vast expanse of the empire sprawling out beneath you, like a carefully drawn map, the jungle only beginning to reclaim what was once its kingdom. The towering spires of temples seem like jagged teeth rising from the earth, and far below, the waterways snake through the city like silver ribbons in the fading light. The illusion is overwhelming. In this moment, the past feels not so much a memory, but a living thing. But the grandeur of the view also reveals something else, a terrifying vulnerability. You can't help but feel it. Angkor may have seemed invincible to its builders, but they couldn't control the one thing that ultimately brought the empire to its knees: the weather. The Khmer Empire was built with an extraordinary mastery of hydrology. You know this now, having walked along canals, past barrays, and seen the remains of their irrigation systems. The Khmer were some of the first to understand the power of water, not just as a tool, but as a force that shaped the world. Their ability to manage monsoon floods and store water for dry months gave Angkor its strength, turning a temperamental landscape into a thriving, sustainable city. But the very nature of these systems was double-edged. Historians still debate the precise reasons behind Angkor's decline. The most accepted theory is that the city's elaborate waterworks, which had once been an asset, became its undoing. Over time, the canals and reservoirs became clogged with silt and debris, making the entire water system less effective. During the rainy season, the monsoons grew more erratic. The sudden surges of water overwhelmed the city's already fragile infrastructure, flooding neighborhoods, destroying crops, and leaving Angkor vulnerable to both natural disaster and economic collapse. You imagine what it would have been like. A king watching his vast network of canals fill with water one year, then seeing them fail to release it the next. The desperation of his subjects, who had once relied on the canals for their crops, now left with nothing. It's one of those quiet collapses that you wouldn't even notice if you weren't paying attention. Just a slow, creeping decline as nature starts to push back. While many have speculated that Angkor's collapse was entirely due to the failure of its hydraulic system, there are other voices in the academic world. Some argue that the political and military pressures of the time played a significant role. The Khmer Empire, after all, wasn't just facing environmental challenges. It was fighting wars with neighboring kingdoms, particularly the Cham people from what is now Vietnam. These invasions, combined with internal rebellions, may have strained the empire's resources. You sit on a stone bench, allowing yourself to feel the weight of the moment. Angkor, the grand capital of an empire that stretched its reach from Vietnam to Thailand, was torn apart by a combination of environmental forces and human frailty. As the empire struggled to maintain control of its land and water, the system that had allowed it to thrive began to unravel. But it wasn't just the destruction of water systems that played a part in Angkor's downfall. The Khmer had also suffered from the intrusion of the very forces they had once relied upon. The city's water systems were so dependent on the monsoons that when those rains became more unpredictable, it was like the gods themselves had turned their backs on the Khmer people. Some scholars argue that this inconsistency in rainfall may have undermined the credibility of the Devaraja kings, who claimed to control both the natural and spiritual worlds. Without the reliable power of the monsoon, the divine right of kings became much harder to believe in. As the days turned to years, Angkor's hydraulic systems were no longer able to manage the water in ways they once had. It's almost poetic, isn't it? A system built with such precision and intelligence became overwhelmed by nature's randomness, its inability to predict the whims of the weather or the forces of time. But nature doesn't need to explain itself. It simply is. Here's something interesting. Archaeological evidence shows that as the great reservoirs began to fail, the Khmer moved away from their traditional agricultural methods and began cultivating more drought-resistant crops. It was an adaptation to a new reality, one where the once dependable monsoon became an unpredictable monster. Even the best laid plans falter when faced with nature's capriciousness. And yet, you can't deny the haunting beauty of the ruins around you. There's something tragic in the way these vast temples and grand structures have been overtaken by the jungle. The statues that once held divine power, now sit in silence, their stone eyes staring out at a world that has moved on. The canals, which once carried life-giving water, now lie abandoned, their surface rippling only with the occasional breeze. You wonder how many other cities have faced the same fate as Angkor, where nature and human ambition collide in a slow, suffocating embrace. There's a sense of inevitability about it, the idea that all great empires will, one day, fade into memory. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but the clock is always ticking, and the forces of nature wait patiently just beyond the horizon. As you begin to descend the temple steps, the faint murmur of water trickling through the broken canals reminds you that the city is still alive in some way, not in the sense that its kings once lived here, but in the quiet persistence of the jungle, which continues to reclaim what it once lost. The past is never truly gone. It lingers in the moss, in the carvings, in the very stones that once held so much power. You leave the temple, but Angkor stays with you. The question that lingers in your mind is this: what happens when humanity forgets its own fragility? When we build something so grand, so powerful, that we forget the forces that will eventually undo it? The answer, it seems, is written not in stone, but in the soft whisper of the jungle, reclaiming what it once let go. Word count 1090. Awaiting, continue. Continue. ChatGPT Danai. Section 6. As the light continues to fade, you pause at the foot of another temple's towering entrance, feeling the cool air of evening settle on your skin. A faint breeze rustles the leaves of the surrounding trees, but there's something else in the stillness, an eerie quiet that almost seems to hold its breath. It's as if the city is listening to its own long-lost stories. You step through the archway, beneath the half-fallen walls, and into what was once the heart of Angkor's military might. The very fact that this section of the city has been preserved so well is a testament to the violence that it endured. While the grandeur of Angkor's temples and waterworks made it famous, it was the king's military campaigns that held the empire together. And those campaigns, they weren't just ceremonial. They were the stuff of legends, full of bloody clashes and shifting alliances. At its peak, the Khmer Empire expanded far beyond the borders of modern Cambodia. It stretched into Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, and Burma. The kings of Angkor were not just architects and spiritual leaders. They were also fierce warriors. Their armies clashed with their neighbors, most notably the Cham people to the east. The Cham were a maritime empire, and their attacks on Angkor came in waves over several centuries. Angkor fought back, but as with all wars, the toll was high. Historians still debate the extent to which military conflict contributed to Angkor's decline. On one hand, the Khmer managed to fend off many invasions. They built fortified walls and a massive army. But on the other hand, these military campaigns strained the empire's resources. Maintaining an empire that spanned such vast territory required constant war, resources, and manpower. Resources that the city's crumbling water systems could no longer sustain. You walk through the remnants of a defensive structure, stepping over shattered stonework and broken carvings that once depicted warriors in battle. There's a peculiar silence here, almost as though the stones themselves are holding the ghosts of those who fought to keep the empire intact. The fact that Angkor's military structures have survived so long feels like a quiet testimony to the city's resilience. These were the last strongholds of a dying empire, places where the kingdom's final defenders must have made their last stand. As you continue through the crumbling ruins, you can almost hear the clash of steel and the thundering of elephants. The Khmer were notorious for their use of war elephants, and the mere sight of one in battle would have struck terror into the hearts of their enemies. These massive beasts were armored, trained to charge into battle with devastating force. But the war elephants weren't just for show. They were a key element of Angkor's military prowess, used to crush enemy formations and strike fear into the hearts of their foes. But here's the catch. As Angkor's power waned, so too did the effectiveness of its military. By the 13th century, the Cham and other neighboring kingdoms began to push back harder. The Khmer found themselves stretched thin, fighting wars on multiple fronts, with fewer resources to support the vast machinery of war. You pause by a large stone lion statue that once guarded one of the entrances to the city. Its face is worn, its eyes long since eroded by time and weather. But you can still see the power that it once symbolized. Lions were symbols of royal power, and these statues would have once been placed at key locations to show the reach of the king's authority. Now, the lion is silent, its roar only a memory in the wind. It's a strange moment. You can feel the weight of history pressing down around you, the sense that Angkor's military prowess was both its strength and its vulnerability. The very thing that once protected the empire ultimately contributed to its downfall. But the military defeat wasn't the only blow Angkor suffered. In the 14th century, the Khmer Empire faced a new kind of threat, the rise of the Thai kingdoms to the west. As the power of Angkor weakened, the Thai took advantage, invading and ultimately sacking the city. The final blow came in 1431, when the Thai forces captured Angkor, marking the end of the city as the capital of the Khmer Empire. You can almost feel the weight of that final conquest as you step in to what would have been the royal palace complex. The stones here seem to carry an air of finality, like a graveyard for the once mighty kings who had watched over the empire. The elaborate palace halls, once home to rulers and their courts, are now nothing more than foundations and fallen columns. Yet in this decay, there is something strangely beautiful, a poignant reminder of how empires, no matter how powerful, are always at the mercy of time. Historians still argue about the reasons behind the fall of Angkor. Was it the military defeats, the shifting trade routes, the collapse of the water system? Perhaps it was all of these factors, combined with the erosion of royal authority. Whatever the cause, it's clear that by the time the Thai sacked the city, Angkor was already a shadow of its former self. The final abandonment of Angkor is often painted as a catastrophic event, but in truth, it was more of a slow, creeping death. The city's residents began to leave long before the final conquest. Some fled the wars, others the encroaching jungle and the failing water system. The city, once a hub of power and culture, was simply left behind. Yet, as you stand in the midst of the ruins, there's an undeniable sense of mystery. Despite all the turmoil, despite the wars and the gradual collapse, Angkor's legacy didn't die. The city, though abandoned, continued to live on in the memories of the people who had once called it home. And perhaps, in a way, it continues to live on in the minds of people like you. As the light fades completely and the jungle hums around you, you wonder if Angkor will ever truly fade into the past. Will it continue to haunt the future? Maybe the question isn't when Angkor fell, but rather, when did it stop being relevant? You're still walking its streets, aren't you? Still discovering its secrets, piece by piece. Word count 1086. Awaiting, continue. Bạn đã nói, continue. ChatGPT đã nói. Section 4. The night is settling in now. The jungle around you alive, with the sounds of nocturnal creatures stirring to life. The temperature drops just enough to make you shiver, but there's an eerie stillness in the air as you move deeper into Angkor. You feel as though the city is quietly watching, waiting for something, though you're not sure what. The fading glow of the setting sun has long disappeared, and only the soft rustle of the trees and the occasional call of a distant bird punctuate the silence. But as you walk further into the ruins, something shifts in the atmosphere. There's an almost palpable weight to the air. It's not the heat, not the humidity. It's something more elusive. It's as though you've crossed a threshold, stepping into a world where history and the present meet. The ghosts of Angkor seem to hang in the air, invisible but ever present, like an unseen breeze. It's here, among the shadows of collapsed temples and the remains of a once great empire, that you begin to feel the spiritual pulse of the city, not just in the carvings or the architecture, but in the way the stones seem to hum with forgotten chants, the flicker of long extinguished incense, and the silent steps of monks who once walked these very paths. And this is where things get a bit unusual. You've probably heard the ghost stories, the tales of restless spirits that wander through the ruins of Angkor, stories of curses, of angry gods seeking vengeance for forgotten offerings, of strange lights that flicker over the berets at night. Some believe that Angkor was so infused with divine energy that even in its fall, it remained haunted by the very deities that once watched over it. Now, let's be clear. These are stories, but as you wander deeper into the night, it's hard not to feel that there's something off about the atmosphere here. It's not just the oppressive weight of the past. It's something else, something unspoken. Historians, of course, don't usually entertain the idea of spirits lingering in ancient ruins, but they do acknowledge something strange about Angkor's aura. The city's abandonment wasn't swift, it was gradual, and by the time the last of its inhabitants left, the place was already steeped in centuries of spiritual significance. But then there's that fringe theory. What if the stories of hauntings are more than just superstition? What if Angkor's gods didn't disappear when the last king fell? What if they simply retreated, hiding in the shadows, waiting for someone to come looking for them? You certainly wouldn't be the first. You pass beneath a crumbled arch, and a sudden breeze stirs the leaves in the trees, sending a chill up your spine. You glance up at the towering walls, where the faces of the Apsaras, the celestial dancers, seem to watch you as you move, their eyes fixed and unblinking. For a moment, you could almost swear they've shifted, their expressions just slightly different than when you passed them earlier. But that's impossible, right? After all, these are just stone carvings, centuries old. Still, you can't shake the feeling that something is watching you. The Apsaras aren't just carvings. They were once part of the city's religious life. In Hindu and later Buddhist mythology, they were celestial beings, often associated with beauty, grace, and the divine. Their delicate, dance-like forms adorn nearly every temple and palace in Angkor, a reminder that the gods were always watching, always present. But now, their stone smiles seem just a little too knowing, their graceful poses a little too eerie. As you move further into the ruins, you notice more of these Apsaras, dozens of them, etched into every available surface. Their flowing robes and delicate postures create a sense of serenity. But the longer you look, the more unsettling they become. It's as if they're frozen in time, caught in the middle of some long-forgotten dance that no one will ever see again. Here's a bit of trivia you might not have known. Many of the Apsaras at Angkor were actually created in the image of real women who lived and worked in the city. Some historians believe that these women were actual dancers, priestesses, or consorts of the kings. They were immortalized in stone, their beauty and grace captured for all eternity in the carvings that line the temples. But as you look at these stone figures now, it's hard not to wonder if their dance was always meant to be more than just an aesthetic. Were they, in some way, part of the city's spiritual fabric? Were they guardians of the divine energy that flowed through Angkor? Historians still argue whether these figures were meant to symbolize human women, divine beings, or both. Some scholars even suggest that the apsaras were an expression of the king's divine power, a way to show that the ruler controlled not just the earthly realm, but the spiritual one as well. The dancers, then, were both symbols of the king's greatness and a reminder of the god's presence on earth. You pause at one of the apsaras and take in the intricate details of the carving. Her face is serene, but there's something unsettling about the way her eyes seem to follow you. Maybe it's just the dim light, or maybe it's something more. You feel a sudden urge to move on, but as you turn to leave, you hear it, a soft, distant sound, like the rustle of silk in the wind. It's too soft to be real, but in the silence of the jungle, it feels as though it's coming from the very walls around you. For a moment, you wonder if the apsaras are still dancing in some far-off corner of the city, their celestial music floating in the air, just out of reach. And then, just as suddenly as it came, the sound disappears, leaving you standing alone in the heart of Angkor, the jungle's hum, once again, the only thing to fill the silence. You shake your head, telling yourself it's just your imagination. But as you walk deeper into the ruins, you can't help but feel that the apsaras are still there, watching, waiting, and perhaps even beckoning you to join their eternal dance. Word count 1089. Awaiting, continue. Panting đã nói, continue. ChatGPT đã nói. Section 10. The deeper you wander into Angkor, the more the city seems to take on a life of its own. The shadows grow long and deep, stretching across the broken stones like fingers of the past reaching out, drawing you in. With each step, the air grows thicker with the weight of history. The jungle song, now an almost imperceptible hum that seems to vibrate through your very bones. You begin to realize that Angkor isn't just a city. It's a puzzle, a riddle written in stone and time. The temples, the roads, the statues, they don't just sit there like relics. They tell a story that was meant to be understood, perhaps only by those who would one day come searching for answers, like you. One of the most intriguing things about Angkor is how the city seemed to disappear from history for centuries. It was as if it had been deliberately hidden away, a secret so well kept that even the surrounding jungles, now tangled and overgrown, couldn't shake it free. When French explorer Henri Mouhot stumbled across Angkor in the 1860s, he found the ruins so hidden by the jungle that they were nearly unrecognizable. To the Western world, the Khmer Empire seemed to have vanished completely, like a civilization that had left no trace behind. But was it really lost, or was it concealed, intentionally forgotten? Historians still argue over why Angkor was abandoned. Was it because the empire fell to invaders like the Cham, or was it a slow collapse driven by the weakening of the king's divine authority, the failure of the water system, and the relentless pressure of growing wars? Or, as some suggest, was the abandonment not a collapse at all, but rather a shift in power, a transition from one political or religious center to another? Here's the kicker. What if the disappearance of Angkor wasn't an accident, but something orchestrated? What if the city, in all its spiritual power, was hidden intentionally, its location kept secret for reasons that are still unclear today? It's one of those tantalizing mysteries that historians and archaeologists like to toss around during late-night discussions. There's a theory that suggests that the Khmer intentionally abandoned Angkor to hide it from potential invaders. The very size of the city, the complexity of its architecture, and the symbolism of its design could have made it a target for enemies looking to claim its wealth and its spiritual power. As the Khmer king's divine authority weakened and external threats grew stronger, some argue Angkor was abandoned and buried, not by nature's slow decay, but by design. Another theory revolves around the idea that Angkor, as a sacred site, was never meant to last forever. It's a fascinating thought. What if the builders of Angkor, those who crafted the temples and carved the faces of gods into stone, knew that the city would one day be swallowed by the jungle? What if they deliberately constructed it in such a way that it would be taken back by nature, as if the city itself were part of a divine cycle, an ever-evolving expression of life and death? You pause before one of Angkor's towering structures, a single stone tower that rises like an ancient sentinel against the dark sky. It seems so unyielding, so eternal, but you also know that it, too, will eventually return to the earth. Perhaps that is the true beauty of Angkor, not its permanence, but its recognition of the inevitable cycle of rise and fall. The very act of its creation was an acknowledgement that nothing lasts forever, not even gods. A thought occurs to you as you stand in the shadow of these ruins. Perhaps the city wasn't truly lost at all. It was hidden, yes, but not forgotten. You look at the intricate carvings around you, the faces of gods and warriors, the dancing apsaras that once seemed so full of life. All of these are clues, breadcrumbs left behind by those who built Angkor. The city may have vanished from history, but the memory of it lived on in the minds of those who came after. Even today, Angkor continues to exert a strange pull on people. Archaeologists, historians, and adventurers have all sought to unlock its secrets, uncover its hidden mysteries, and understand its meaning. The city is no longer buried beneath the jungle's grasp, but its true significance still eludes us in many ways. It remains a powerful symbol of human ambition, divine belief, and the mysteries of time itself. It's also possible that some aspects of Angkor were meant to remain hidden forever. Perhaps there are truths about the city's construction, its spiritual significance, and its ultimate abandonment that we're not meant to understand. Maybe the Apsaras, the gods carved into the stone, still watch, knowing that some mysteries are too powerful to ever be fully revealed. You move further through the city, drawn by the pull of its secrets. The jungle is quieter now, the soft rustle of leaves the only sound as you cross over a broken stone bridge. Beneath you, the waters of an old canal stretch out in the dim light, the reflection of the sky rippling across its surface. It's almost as if the city is waiting for you to make sense of it all, to understand why it was built, why it fell, and why it continues to haunt the world centuries after its supposed end. Perhaps the true mystery of Angkor isn't about finding what was lost, but understanding why it was hidden in the first place. The city may have faded from history, but it's never truly gone. It exists in some form in the minds of all those who come searching for answers. And it's here, in the stillness of the jungle and the ruins, that you begin to understand the enduring power of Angkor, not in the buildings or the temples, but in the very mystery of its existence. As you make your way deeper into the city, you realize that the journey through Angkor isn't just a physical one. It's a journey through time, through the layers of history, myth, and mystery that continue to define this remarkable place. Word count 1089. Awaiting, continue.